Lucas Bennett, a sturdy figure built from years of hard labor, stepped off the rusted pickup truck, the gravel crunching beneath his boots as he walked toward the sleek, modern hangar. The contrast between him and the private airport was stark. The polished glass and shiny steel gleamed in the sunlight, a world away from the worn barns and dirt roads of his family's farm in Alabama. The smell of oil and jet fuel mixed with the crisp morning air, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. But Lucas was unbothered. His hands, calloused from years of tending to his fields, gripped the edges of the faded denim of his overalls as he adjusted his worn cap. This was his moment. This was his next step. As he entered the hangar, the eyes of the employees, most of whom wore suits and designer shoes, dropped briefly to Lucas's scuffed boots, then shot upward, meeting the gaze of their colleagues as if to say, "Is this guy for real?" Despite the unspoken judgment, Lucas walked with a quiet confidence, his chest puffed out with the pride of a man who had built something from nothing. It wasn't his first time walking into a room where people didn't expect him, but it was perhaps the most important one. He made his way to the front, where the jet sat, gleaming with its aerodynamic design and polished metal. It looked out of place in this world of farmers, land, and crops, yet it was the key to expanding his business, the key to bringing his farm to new heights. For years, Lucas had worked relentlessly, transforming the small, struggling farm he inherited into a thriving business that supplied fresh produce to cities across the state. He wasn't just a farmer anymore. He was a businessman, a pioneer in his field, and today, he was here to take that success to the skies. A voice broke through his thoughts. "You must be Lucas Bennett. I'm Marcus. I'll be assisting you today." Marcus was a sharply dressed man, the kind of salesman who seemed to have emerged straight from a business textbook. His posture was perfect, his smile practiced, and his handshake just firm enough to convey professionalism without being too forceful. Lucas returned the handshake, his grip steady, his eyes locked onto Marcus's. "Nice to meet you," he said. "I'm looking to buy a jet." The salesman's smile faltered for just a split second, but it was enough to be noticed. It wasn't just surprise. There was a trace of skepticism. "A jet, huh? Well, I'm sure we can find something that fits your needs." Marcus led Lucas toward a sleek model parked at the far end of the hangar, a jet that screamed luxury, with its polished exterior and plush interior visible through the open door. Lucas's eyes scanned the aircraft, not as a symbol of wealth or status, but as a tool that would help him expand his business. He wasn't interested in the shiny exterior. He was focused on the logistics. "This is the Falcon 500, Marcus continued, clearly relishing the moment. "It's one of the finest jets on the market, perfect for someone with discerning taste. You'll be able to travel in style, and your clients will surely take notice." Lucas nodded, but his gaze was not on the polished interior. Instead, he squatted down to examine the cargo hold. "How much weight can it carry?" he asked, cutting through the salesman's enthusiasm with the precision of a man who'd spent his life calculating the exact weight of every crop, every bushel of produce that went into his truck. Marcus blinked, clearly thrown off guard. "Well, it's primarily designed for passenger comfort, but I believe the cargo hold can handle around 1,500 pounds. Lucas's brow furrowed. "I need at least 3 tons, he said matter-of-factly, his voice steady but firm. "I need a jet that can carry not just passengers, but crates of fresh produce. My farm's grown, and I'm delivering across multiple states. The last thing I need is a jet that can't carry the load." The change in Marcus's expression was subtle, but noticeable. He stifled a laugh, clearly amused by Lucas's boldness. "I'm not sure this model is quite what you're looking for then," he said, trying to hide his condescension behind a veil of professionalism. "But we have other models, jets that specialize in long-distance business flights, for example." "I didn't come here for style or comfort," Lucas replied, his voice calm but unwavering. "I need efficiency. I need a jet that will help me get my products to the cities faster than any truck could. I don't have time to waste." Marcus hesitated, his smile becoming tighter as he processed the information. The truth was, he hadn't expected someone like Lucas Bennett to even be able to afford a jet, let alone need one for transporting produce. To him, Lucas was just another country bumpkin who had probably made a little money off his farm, but certainly not enough to warrant such an extravagant purchase. He didn't see the ambition in Lucas's eyes. He didn't understand the vision. But Lucas wasn't deterred. "I've built something here. I've got 50 employees, and my business is growing every year. I'm not just a farmer anymore. I'm running a supply chain that reaches all across the region. I know my products are the best, and I'm ready to take that next step. I need a jet that will help me deliver directly to the markets." The words hung in the air, making it clear that Lucas wasn't asking for validation. He didn't need Marcus to approve of his vision. He simply needed the right tool. As Lucas spoke, another salesman approached, a man named Greg, dressed more simply than Marcus, but with an air of genuine professionalism. He shook Lucas's hand firmly, offering a quiet, respectful greeting. There was no judgment in Greg's eyes, no skepticism in his tone. "I can help you with that," he said, a hint of confidence in his voice. Marcus shot a quick glance at Greg, clearly irritated by the interruption. But Greg's calm demeanor and willingness to listen were a stark contrast to Marcus's condescension. Lucas could see the difference immediately and felt a flicker of hope. "I'm looking for something practical," Lucas said, returning his gaze to Marcus. "Not something that'll get me attention when I land, but something that'll get my produce where it needs to go. So, do we have a deal or not?" Marcus's lips tightened into a thin line as he fought to mask his frustration. He had underestimated this farmer, and now the reality of it was beginning to sink in. The battle of perception had only just begun. Lucas Bennett's hands trembled slightly as he sat back in the leather seat of his truck, watching the familiar landscape of Alabama slip by. His eyes were drawn to the endless fields, now dotted with the bright green shoots of the crops he had carefully planted. The journey ahead of him was one he had been preparing for all his life, though it had never been as clear as it was now. But behind him, on the horizon of those fields, was a history, one of struggle, sacrifice, and endless days under the hot sun. It hadn't always been this way. As a boy, Lucas had known nothing but hardship. He was raised on the farm by his parents, who had worked tirelessly to make ends meet. There were times when food was scarce, and winters were brutal. The land, though rich in its potential, had been unforgiving. The crops didn't always grow, and when they did, the market prices often didn't make the labor worth it. His father, John Bennett, was a proud man, a man who believed in the old ways of farming. He wouldn't accept help from anyone, refused to invest in new technology, and believed that if the farm failed, it was simply because the land didn't have enough to give. But Lucas wasn't satisfied with that. Even as a teenager, he could see the opportunities that others had taken advantage of, and he felt the frustration of watching his family struggle while others thrived. It was his mother, Ruth, who had instilled in him the value of resilience. She often told him that if you wanted something to change, you had to be the one to make it happen. It was this drive that pushed Lucas to begin thinking outside the box. He started small, planting new crops that were better suited to the changing climate and experimenting with methods his father would have never considered. It wasn't until Lucas took over the farm after his father's passing that he truly began to see the results of his hard work. The breakthrough came when Lucas decided to bypass the middlemen who had been taking a hefty chunk of his profits. He began working directly with buyers in the cities, cutting out the wholesalers who had long controlled the market. It was risky, but he trusted his instincts. He personally delivered the fresh produce, ensuring the highest quality and service. His customers quickly noticed the difference. Within just a few years, Lucas expanded his farm to supply not only his hometown, but also neighboring states. His business grew exponentially, and soon he had 50 employees working for him, people who believed in his vision, who saw what he was building, and who worked hard alongside him to make it happen. The land that had once been a source of struggle became a well-oiled machine, producing millions of dollars in revenue. It was no longer just a farm. It was an empire in the making. But despite all his success, Lucas never forgot where he came from. He still wore his overalls, still drove his truck instead of a luxury car. He still took pride in the sweat and dirt that came with the work he did. To him, the land was sacred, and everything he had built was because of it. As the years went by, Lucas continued to innovate. He introduced more sustainable practices, developed stronger relationships with local grocers and restaurants, and focused on growing his brand. His reputation as a reliable, honest businessman spread, and soon he was in talks with major retailers in major cities. But Lucas knew he had to think even bigger. It was that drive that led him to today. The idea of a jet was not just about luxury, it was about efficiency. He could get his produce to the markets faster, bypassing the delays of shipping and truck routes. He could make the entire process more streamlined, cutting down on wasted time and bringing fresh goods to consumers faster than ever before. It wasn't about status. It was about keeping his business one step ahead. As Lucas pulled his truck into the hangar, his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his boots crunching against the pavement. He couldn't help but think about how much had changed, how far he had come from the small, struggling farm he had inherited. But there was still more to do, and that jet was just the beginning. The past was never too far from his mind. Lucas knew that the road to success had been anything but smooth, but it had been worth every bump along the way. He had learned early on that nothing worth having came easily. He had built his farm from the ground up, and now he was ready to take it to the next level. He entered the hangar once more, his focus sharp. His dream of expanding his business wasn't a fantasy. It was becoming a reality. The jet, now gleaming under the bright lights, was the symbol of that reality. A means to an end. And Lucas Bennett wasn't about to let anyone, not even Marcus or anyone else who doubted him, stand in his way. His journey had been long, but he wasn't done yet. He was ready for the next chapter. And this time, it wasn't just the farm he was taking to the skies, it was his future. The moment Lucas stepped back into the hangar, the cool air seemed to close in around him, the sleek jet now looming even larger in his mind. It wasn't just about the jet anymore. It was about proving himself to the people who had always looked down on him, who couldn't see the vision that had carried him from a struggling farm to the success he now commanded. As he approached the jet, Marcus was already there, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor with each step, his smile tight but still there, like a mask he couldn't quite remove. "So, what do you think?" Marcus asked, standing beside the gleaming jet with his arms crossed over his chest, the practiced tone of a salesman still very much in place. Lucas gave the jet another long look, his gaze focused, calculating. He wasn't intimidated by the luxury of it. He had seen much of it before, even if he never indulged in it. His farm had taught him the value of practicality, and while he could appreciate the jet's craftsmanship, he wasn't here for flash. He was here for functionality. "I'm looking for something that'll work for my needs," Lucas replied, his voice steady, "not something to impress the people on the ground." Marcus chuckled lightly, a touch of condescension in the sound. "Well, this will certainly impress the people on the ground," he said, his tone dripping with subtle judgment. "But I'm sure we can find something practical for you, something less showy." Lucas could feel the weight of Marcus's words, like they were meant to remind him of his place. He had been through this before. People often underestimated him. He'd seen it with his suppliers, with investors, and even with the bankers who once laughed in his face when he sought a loan to expand his farm. But Lucas wasn't here to argue with Marcus. He was here to do business, and he wasn't about to let anyone dismiss him, especially not now. "I'm not here to waste your time, Marcus," Lucas said, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm serious about this purchase. I need a jet that can carry my produce, and I need it soon." Marcus's face twitched at the mention of produce. His eyes flicked to the jet's glossy exterior and then back to Lucas, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "You want to use this jet for produce?" he asked, clearly trying to mask his surprise behind a thin layer of politeness. "Are you sure you're not looking for something more, well, fitting for your line of work? A private jet, perhaps, for personal travel?" Lucas squared his shoulders, his jaw tightening. He knew what Marcus was implying. To the salesman, Lucas was just another small-town businessman looking to live a lavish lifestyle. But Lucas wasn't in the market for luxury. He was in the market for efficiency, for speed, for a tool that would enable him to deliver his products faster than his competitors. The jet wasn't about looking important. It was about keeping his farm competitive in an industry that was constantly changing. I've got 50 employees and customers in 10 states, Lucas said, his voice cutting through Marcus's thinly veiled skepticism. My business is growing, and I need something that can help me scale. This isn't about luxury. It's about getting fresh produce to the market on time. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, the hangar felt smaller, the distance between them closing. Lucas could see the flicker of realization in Marcus's eyes as the gravity of what Lucas was saying began to sink in. But it was only for a second before Marcus masked it again, his professional smile returning, though now with a hint of awkwardness. Well, we'll see what we can do, Marcus said, trying to recover. I'll show you some other models. We've got a few options that might better fit your needs. But before he could continue, another voice broke through, smooth and confident. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. A new man had appeared in the hangar, a tall, well-built individual with sharp features, dressed in a modest yet professional suit. It was Greg, the other salesman, who had briefly introduced himself earlier. His presence was calm, his demeanor respectful, a stark contrast to Marcus's dismissive attitude. Lucas turned to face him, his expression neutral but appreciative. I'm Lucas Bennett, he said, extending his hand. Greg Summers, the man replied, shaking his hand firmly. I couldn't help but hear what you said about needing a jet for your business. If you're serious about transporting produce, there are some models that might be more suitable than what Marcus is showing you. Marcus's face soured slightly at Greg's interruption, but he didn't say anything. Lucas, on the other hand, welcomed the change. There was something different about Greg, something that made Lucas feel like he was finally speaking with someone who understood what he was looking for. Greg continued, his tone both professional and thoughtful. I understand the need for something more practical. There's a jet I'm familiar with, can carry a bit more weight, and has the modifications you'd need for long-distance, cargo-heavy flights. Marcus's eyes darted between Greg and Lucas, his irritation rising, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Well, let's see what Greg has to offer, Lucas said, nodding toward the other salesman. Greg led Lucas to a different jet, one that looked less flashy, more utilitarian but still sleek. The difference was immediately noticeable. It wasn't designed for luxury travel, it was designed for work. Lucas felt a sense of relief wash over him. This was the kind of jet he needed. This is the Aero 500, Greg said, pointing to the model. It's a bit smaller than the Falcon 500, but it has a large cargo hold, and the modifications can be made to carry the load you need. You'll also find it more fuel efficient, which will save you money in the long run. Lucas nodded thoughtfully, inspecting the jet from every angle. He was impressed. It was the kind of aircraft that could actually help him do his job. How much weight can it carry? He asked. Greg didn't hesitate. It can carry up to 5,000 pounds. I can also arrange for modifications to add more cargo space if necessary. Lucas's eyes narrowed in focus. This was what he had been searching for, a jet that could help him meet the demands of his growing business. A jet that wasn't about luxury, but about real-world practicality. He could already see the possibilities. Faster deliveries, fresher produce, more clients. I'll take it, Lucas said, his decision clear. Greg smiled, but it was more than just a polite gesture. It was a smile of understanding, of recognizing the drive and determination behind Lucas's decision. Marcus, however, seemed to choke on the words that followed, his pride bruised but hidden behind a forced smile. Well, it looks like we have a deal then, Marcus said, though his tone lacked the enthusiasm it had when he first greeted Lucas. As the paperwork was drawn up, Lucas's mind was already racing, thinking of the next steps. He had secured the jet, but he had much more to accomplish. The jet wasn't just a symbol of success, it was a tool for growth. And as the final numbers were written down, Lucas Bennett knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. As the hum of the jet's engines began to settle into a steady, mechanical rhythm, Lucas sat back in the plush seat of the Aero 500, his mind still racing with the significance of what had just transpired. The transaction had been swift, perhaps even too smooth, but the weight of his decision lingered in the air. It wasn't just a purchase. It was a validation. For years, he had worked tirelessly to build his farm into something worthy of recognition, and now, With the purchase of this jet, he was showing the world that his hard work had paid off. No one could dismiss him now. Beside him, Greg was explaining the finer details of the jet's modifications, but Lucas's thoughts were elsewhere. He was thinking about the future, the growth of his business, the challenges of expansion, and the new heights he would reach. The jet was just a tool, a means to an end, but the potential it held was limitless. So as you can see, the cargo hold is quite spacious, Greg continued, gesturing to the large compartment behind them. We can easily modify it to carry crates of produce, and the layout will allow for temperature control if you're shipping perishable goods. The systems are top of the line, and with the added weight capacity, it will be able to handle large shipments without any issues. Lucas nodded, taking it all in. He'd done his research before stepping into this hangar, but seeing the jet in person, understanding its capabilities, made the reality of his purchase all the more concrete. This wasn't just about having a luxury toy, it was about giving his business a serious edge. I appreciate the details, Lucas said, his voice calm but determined. I'm looking for efficiency above all. This jet has to help me move more product faster. The faster I can get it into the hands of my customers, the better. Greg, sensing Lucas's seriousness, straightened up, his demeanor shifting from that of a salesman to that of a true professional. Absolutely, he said. I've worked with a lot of clients who want luxury, but this model was built for people like you, business owners who need reliability. We can fine-tune it to suit your needs exactly. As Lucas examined the jet's interior, testing the feel of the leather seats, his fingers grazing the polished surfaces, he couldn't help but remember where he came from. The farm, the long days spent under the hot sun, the years of struggle just to keep the land afloat. He'd come a long way since then, too far to let anyone define him by the worn overalls or the dust on his boots. He had a vision now, and it wasn't just about being a successful farmer. It was about being a leader in his industry, someone who could move the needle, someone who could innovate. A noise from behind broke his thoughts. He turned to find Marcus standing near the hangar's entrance, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The change in the air was palpable. Lucas knew that Marcus hadn't expected him to be serious. He hadn't expected him to buy the jet, to push past the skepticism, to prove that he was more than just a small-town farmer looking for a luxury ride. Marcus cleared his throat. I have to admit, I didn't see this coming, he said, though there was a trace of reluctance in his voice. I thought, well, I didn't think this was the direction you'd be going in. Lucas met his gaze, unflinching. I've learned not to waste time on things that don't matter. This jet is about the future. It's not a symbol of luxury. It's a step toward a bigger goal. There was a long pause as Marcus processed his words. Lucas could see the wheels turning in his mind, the realization dawning on him. For all his wealth and experience, Marcus had been blind to the true value of hard work, of vision. Lucas hadn't just made money. He had built something from the ground up. This jet wasn't just for his business. It was a statement that his vision would never be limited by other people's perceptions. Finally, Marcus nodded, a hint of respect creeping into his voice. I get it now, he said, his tone more genuine than before. This is more than just a purchase. It's a strategic move. Lucas gave him a simple nod, accepting the words without fanfare. He wasn't here for approval. He was here to make things happen. Exactly. And that's why this jet needs to be ready for business. No more delays. Greg, ever the professional, stepped in. We'll have it customized exactly to your specifications, he assured Lucas. We can start the modifications right away. Get the systems in place to accommodate your cargo and your needs. Lucas stood up, the decision final in his mind. Let's get it done. As he turned to leave the jet, he noticed Marcus standing slightly apart, his arms now unfolded, his posture more relaxed than it had been earlier. There was a shift in the dynamic, a silent acknowledgement that Lucas had earned the respect he had always known he deserved, even if it hadn't been granted easily. Marcus had underestimated him, again, and Lucas had proven him wrong. But more importantly, Lucas had proven something to himself, that he could push past the limits others placed on him and continue building the future he'd always imagined. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hangar as they walked toward the office to finalize the paperwork. Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about securing a jet. This was about taking control of his future. And as he stepped out of the hangar into the cool, crisp air, Lucas felt a quiet satisfaction. His journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The hum of the jet engines faded as the group moved toward the office. The paperwork was ready, but the weight of the previous conversation lingered in the air. Greg, now fully on Lucas's side, walked ahead, securing the final details of the purchase. But Lucas's thoughts drifted back to Marcus, whose eyes still reflected skepticism, even though it was clear that the tide had shifted. As they entered the sleek, modern office, with its polished wood floors and glossy surfaces, Lucas took a seat, leaning back slightly as he folded his arms. His mind was focused. He could feel the gravity of the decision he had just made. This wasn't just a business move. This was personal. It was proof that the man who had grown up with nothing had built something that could stand on its own. The jet would now be the means by which he expanded further. But Lucas knew that even success came with its challenges, and that wasn't lost on him. He wasn't going to let his newfound position of power go to his head. He needed to remain focused, grounded. Marcus took a seat across from him, a tense silence hanging in the air. His hands clasped together tightly on the desk. He finally broke the quiet, his voice soft but sincere. "I owe you an apology, Lucas," he said, his words heavy with a sincerity that hadn't been there when they first met. "I was too quick to judge you. I thought you were just another farmer trying to live out a fantasy, but you've shown me otherwise." Lucas met his gaze without hesitation, his expression stoic. He had seen enough of this before, people underestimating him, dismissing his potential, but something about Marcus's apology felt genuine. There was a momentary pause before Lucas responded, his voice calm but firm. "Apology accepted," he said, the words rolling off his tongue with ease. "But I don't need your validation. This isn't about proving anything to you. It's about taking my business to the next level." Marcus nodded slowly, the understanding between them growing. "Right," he said, the edge of his previous condescension gone. "I see that now, and I have to admit I was wrong. This jet, it's more than just an asset. It's a game changer for you. I can see that you've built something solid, and now you're moving to the next phase. And I'm impressed." There was a shift in the room, a subtle change in the air as Marcus's respect for Lucas grew, but Lucas wasn't here to bask in praise. He had work to do. "Thanks, Marcus," he replied, but his focus was already on the next step. "But let's not waste time. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. This jet needs to be customized right. I'm not just buying a plane, I'm buying an extension of my business." Greg nodded in agreement, sensing Lucas's urgency. "We'll take care of the details right away," he assured Lucas, already pulling out papers to finalize the customizations. Lucas didn't take his eyes off the papers, his mind moving faster than the conversation. "I need this jet to be efficient," he said, his tone resolute. "The faster I can produce, the more ground I can cover. I can't afford delays. We're already in a race to stay ahead of the competition. I want to make sure this jet is an asset, not just a status symbol." As Greg discussed the finer points of the plane's modifications, Marcus continued to sit back, reflecting on what he had just witnessed. The man before him wasn't the same farmer he had met earlier that day. He was a businessman with a clear vision, someone who had turned an idea into something real, something powerful. And Marcus, for all his success, couldn't help but wonder if he had missed something in his own approach that Lucas had nailed from the start. "You know," Marcus finally spoke again, breaking into Lucas's thoughts, "when I started out, I never had the luxury of making moves like this. Everything was about waiting for the right moment, for the right opportunity. But you just went for it." Lucas glanced at him, surprised by the unexpected shift in tone. There was no boastful edge to Marcus's words, just a quiet recognition. "Sometimes you just have to make your own luck," Lucas said, his voice steady, almost matter of fact. "No one's going to hand you success. You have to go after it yourself." Marcus sat back, his gaze fixed on Lucas as though he were seeing him for the first time. "I guess I could learn a thing or two from you," he admitted, the honesty in his voice genuine. Lucas offered a slight nod. "We all can," he replied, before returning his attention to the paperwork. The deal was almost done, But even as they signed the last of the documents, Lucas knew this was just one chapter in a much larger story. There were more battles to be fought, more risks to take. But as he looked over the signed contract, the jet now officially his, Lucas felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about the purchase, it was about what it represented. It was about showing everyone, including himself, that he had what it took to build something meaningful, something that would last. Just as the paperwork was being finalized, there was a brief knock at the door. The young man, Derek, entered, his eyes wide as he stepped into the room. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice filled with a nervous but eager energy. "I just wanted to thank you for what you did earlier. I really appreciate it." Lucas looked up from his documents, his expression softening. "No need to thank me," he said. "I just gave you the chance to prove yourself. It's up to you to take it from here." Derek's face broke into a wide smile, a clear sense of gratitude radiating from him. "I won't let you down, sir," he promised, and Lucas could see the spark of determination in his eyes. For a moment, the room fell into a contemplative silence. Lucas had always believed in the power of giving people a chance, and now, as he watched Derek stand tall, filled with newfound confidence, he knew it had been the right choice. As they finished up the final details, Lucas glanced out the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long, filled with both triumphs and setbacks. But with each step, he knew he was closer to building something that would leave a lasting impact. And with the jet now secured, he was ready to take on whatever came next. As Lucas signed the last page of the contract, finalizing the purchase of the jet, his thoughts momentarily drifted away from the business transaction. His gaze shifted toward the window, where the gleaming jet sat on the tarmac, its polished surface catching the afternoon light. The magnitude of the decision began to settle in. This was no longer just about him or his farm. This was the start of a new chapter, a new frontier that would redefine how he operated. Yet, in the midst of his victory, Lucas couldn't help but feel a familiar pang of responsibility tug at him. He had worked tirelessly to get here, facing countless challenges, fighting against doubt and the odds that had been stacked against him for years. But it wasn't just about getting ahead. It was about pulling others up along the way, ensuring that those who had been overlooked or underestimated had a chance to prove their worth. Just then, he noticed a young man standing near the entrance to the office. His appearance was unassuming, a scruffy jacket, worn jeans, and a nervous look in his eyes. He shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable in the polished environment, but there was a fire in his gaze, a quiet determination. It was Derek. The young man had been there earlier, pleading with the manager for an opportunity to prove himself, and Lucas had taken note of his persistence. His heart had gone out to Derek, seeing a reflection of his younger self, someone who had once fought for every chance, faced rejection, and had to find a way to break through the barriers that stood in his way. Lucas had decided then that he wasn't going to let another person fall through the cracks. "Derek," Lucas said, his voice calm but firm as he gestured for the young man to come forward. The room seemed to grow quieter as Derek hesitated before stepping toward the desk, his hands fidgeting nervously. "I just wanted to thank you for earlier," Derek began, his voice hesitant but filled with gratitude. "I don't know what you saw in me, but I promise I'm ready to work hard. I won't let you down." Lucas looked at him for a moment, his mind scanning Derek's face. There was sincerity in his eyes, a hunger to prove himself that Lucas knew all too well. He had seen that same fire in himself when he was starting out, scraping together every penny to keep his farm afloat, pushing against the odds, refusing to back down. "You don't need to thank me," Lucas replied, his voice steady. "You just needed someone to see your potential. You've got the determination, and that's half the battle. Now, you've got to take it from here." Derek's face brightened at the words, his shoulders lifting as though a weight had been lifted from him. "I won't let you down, sir. I promise. I'll prove that I'm worth the chance you gave me." Lucas nodded once, his gaze shifting to the side as he considered his next move. "You want to prove yourself? Then show me you can think for yourself. There's more to success than just hard work. It's about recognizing opportunities and seizing them, even when it seems like the odds are stacked against you." Derek nodded eagerly, absorbing every word. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. Lucas studied him for a moment longer, then stood up from his seat, offering Derek a firm handshake. Good. I'll keep an eye on you, Derek, but you've got to make it count. As Derek's hand gripped his, Lucas could see the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about a job or a task, it was about taking ownership of his own future. Derek's success was now in his hands, and Lucas knew that the young man had the potential to go far if he was willing to put in the work. The room was still for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice full of newfound confidence. Thank you. I won't forget this. With that, Derek turned to leave the office, his step lighter than it had been when he entered. Lucas watched him go, a small smile forming on his lips. He had made the right choice, giving Derek a chance. In many ways, it was a reminder of what he had fought for all along: equality, opportunity, and the chance to prove that anyone, no matter their background, could succeed if given the right resources and support. As Derek disappeared from view, Lucas returned to his paperwork, the day's events playing through his mind. The jet was no longer just a symbol of success for him. It was a tool that would help him grow, but it was also a means of creating new opportunities for others. He thought back to his own journey, the years spent building his business from the ground up. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when it felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. But Lucas had learned the hard way that success wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference, leaving a legacy that would last. And that was something that could never be measured by the size of his bank account or the luxury of his new jet. As he closed the folder containing the signed papers, Lucas stood, turning toward the window. The jet awaited, but his mind was already ahead, thinking about the future, about expanding his reach, about what he could do with the power that came with his success. He was ready to take the next step, not just for himself, but for the people he could help along the way. It wasn't just about the business, it was about changing lives. The air in the office had shifted dramatically. Where once there had been an undercurrent of skepticism and dismissiveness, now there was something more: respect. Or at least, the beginning of it. Samuel stood with his hands folded behind his back, surveying the scene in front of him. He had made his mark, shown these people what he was about, and proven that there was much more to him than they had initially thought. But Samuel wasn't here to simply buy a jet. He was here to change the dynamic, to show that people like him, the ones who had worked from the ground up, were deserving of the same opportunities and respect as anyone else in the room. His business was about more than just shipping produce. It was about resilience, about having the grit to push through barriers, to face challenges, and to stand firm in the face of doubt. And now, standing in this sleek office with its polished floors and high-end finishes, Samuel realized he had the opportunity to push through one more barrier. As he turned away from the desk and glanced across the showroom floor, his eyes caught a movement near the entrance. It was Derek, the young man he had noticed earlier, the one who had been pleading for an apprenticeship. The kid looked uneasy, clearly out of his element in this luxurious setting. He was standing near the entrance, talking to the manager, who appeared uninterested in the young man's plea. Samuel could see the frustration written across Derek's face. He knew that feeling all too well. He had fought for every opportunity, every inch of progress, and had been told no more times than he cared to count. The system, he had learned, often made it difficult for the underdog to get a fair shot. And here was Derek, a young man with a spark of potential, being brushed aside for reasons Samuel couldn't quite understand. It wasn't right. Without a second thought, Samuel strode across the showroom floor, his boots echoing against the marble as he approached the manager and Derek. The manager, a thin man with graying hair and a stiff posture, didn't even look up as Samuel approached. "What's going on here?" Samuel's voice cut through the silence, firm and unwavering. The manager looked up, clearly startled by the interruption, but quickly recovered. "Nothing to worry about, sir. Just a young man who doesn't quite understand the requirements for an apprenticeship. He's not what we're looking for." Samuel's eyes narrowed as he glanced at Derek, whose face had reddened in the face of rejection. "That's so? You don't think he's got what it takes?" The manager shifted uncomfortably, clearly taken aback by the question. Well, no, not really. He doesn't have the experience or the qualifications. You know how it is. I know how it is, Samuel interrupted. His tone was calm but commanding. But what I also know is that you're looking at this kid and seeing only his lack of experience. You're not seeing what he could be. The manager looked at Samuel, clearly caught off guard by his bluntness. Samuel turned to Derek, who was standing quietly by the door, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. You've got determination, Samuel said to Derek, his voice steady and reassuring. And sometimes that's all you need to get started. It's about drive, about wanting something more than anything else. Derek swallowed hard, his eyes wide. I just want a chance. I'm ready to learn, sir. I'll work hard, I swear. Samuel turned back to the manager. If you give him a chance, I can guarantee you that he'll give you more than your money's worth. That's the kind of person I've always been, and I'm telling you, this kid has the same potential. The manager hesitated, his eyes darting between Derek and Samuel. Samuel's gaze was unyielding, his presence in the room commanding respect. Finally, the manager let out a heavy sigh. Fine, we'll give him a shot, but I'm not promising anything. Samuel nodded, his eyes never leaving the manager's face. That's all I'm asking for. As Derek let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, Samuel gave him a brief nod. Get to work, Derek. Prove them wrong. The young man's face lit up with gratitude. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Samuel watched as Derek turned to leave, his shoulders set with newfound confidence. Samuel couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for the kid. It was a small victory, but one that could change the course of Derek's life. It reminded him why he was here, not just for himself, but for others who were looking for that one opportunity to show what they were made of. As Derek walked away, Samuel's thoughts shifted. The deal wasn't over yet. There was still the jet, still the final paperwork to handle. But for a moment, he allowed himself to savor the impact of what had just happened. He had made a difference, not just in his own life, but in someone else's too. The day had worn on, but Samuel still couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just transpired. The jet negotiation was nearly done. He had the details sorted, the customization options agreed upon, and the final terms locked in. But it wasn't just about the jet anymore. As he looked around the showroom, he saw the faces of the salespeople and the managers, people who had underestimated him at the beginning of the day. Now, they were watching him differently, with respect, with recognition. And that was something Samuel wasn't about to forget. As he stood near the door, preparing to leave and finalize the deal, his mind wandered back to Derek. The kid had gone from pleading for an opportunity to being given a chance to prove himself. Samuel had done more than just secure a jet for his business. He had given Derek a shot at a future, a real chance to change his life. Samuel was no stranger to what it felt like to fight for that chance. He'd worked his way up from the bottom, and he knew what it meant to be overlooked, underestimated. It was a feeling that never left you, but it could also drive you to push harder, to prove everyone wrong. He glanced at the jet one last time. This was a tool, a stepping stone toward the bigger picture. It wasn't just a status symbol. It was a way to expand his reach, to keep building something bigger than himself. But now, standing there in that moment, he knew that his true legacy wouldn't be measured by the business he built or the wealth he accumulated. It would be measured by the people he helped, the opportunities he created. Derek was just the first of many. Samuel's eyes hardened with resolve as he turned toward the door. There was more work to be done, more lives to change, more people to uplift. And with that thought, he stepped out into the afternoon sun, ready to take the next step in his journey. The hum of the air conditioning and the soft click of the pen on the desk were the only sounds in the room as Samuel finalized the details of the jet deal. His eyes, sharp and calculating, skimmed over the terms laid out before him, ensuring every detail was in place. It had taken several hours, many conversations, and a great deal of negotiation, but Samuel was close to securing what he needed, something that would help his business reach new heights. The salesmen, Elliot and Tom, stood on either side of him. Elliot, now noticeably humbled, was much quieter than he had been at the beginning of their discussions. There was none of the condescension in his voice now, only professionalism. Tom, on the other hand, had been supportive throughout the entire process, offering practical advice and treating Samuel with the respect he deserved. It was clear that Tom recognized Samuel's business acumen, and Samuel appreciated that. "Everything looks good," Samuel said, scanning the last few details. He leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction. This was more than just a luxury purchase. This jet would change the way he ran his business, enabling him to transport fresh produce directly to cities faster and more efficiently. "I'm glad we could come to an agreement, Mr. Johnson," Tom said with a slight smile, his tone warm and respectful. "We'll make sure the customization fits your needs perfectly." Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "Thank you, Tom. You've been professional through all of this. I appreciate it." Elliot, who had been unusually quiet for the past several minutes, cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson, I want to apologize again for my earlier assumptions," he said, his voice somewhat stiff. "I underestimated you, and that was a mistake. I've been in this business a long time, and I should have known better." Samuel looked up at Elliot, whose pride had clearly been bruised by the experience. For a brief moment, he considered pushing him further, reminding him of how he had been treated at the start. But instead, Samuel simply nodded. "Apology accepted, Elliot. It's important to recognize when you've been wrong." Elliot's expression softened, and he gave a slight nod in return. "I'll make sure everything is handled from here on out. The jet will be ready when you need it, and we'll follow through on all the specifications." "Good," Samuel replied, standing up from his chair. "I'll be back in touch for the next steps. But for now, I think I've done enough business for one day." As Samuel reached for the door, he paused and turned back to the two salesmen. "And remember, opportunities aren't just for those at the top. Sometimes it's the people who are overlooked who have the biggest potential." Tom gave a nod of understanding, while Elliot gave a stiff but respectful salute. Samuel turned and walked out of the office, the weight of the transaction settling into his bones. But even as he left, the thought that kept circling in his mind was the same one that had carried him through every trial in his life. This was just the beginning. The jet was a tool. His true success lay in what he did with it, how he used it to build something that would benefit not only him, but also the people he met along the way. As Samuel made his way back to his truck, the weight of the day's events began to sink in. He had arrived at the hangar a humble farmer, a man with dirt on his boots and a dream in his heart. Now he was leaving with a jet, an important step forward for his business. Yet it wasn't just the jet that had left an impression on him. It was everything that had unfolded during the day, the opportunities he had created, and the people he had impacted. He had made a mark on this place, on these people who had once doubted him. He had taken something that many would have thought impossible for someone like him, an ordinary farmer, and turned it into a symbol of success. But the true victory was in the way he had used that success. Samuel had not only secured a jet for his business, he had given Derek a chance, a lifeline that could change the young man's future. He had seen potential where others saw nothing. As he climbed into his truck, Samuel's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Derek, and Samuel's heart gave a quiet, satisfying lurch as he read the text. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for believing in me. I got the apprenticeship. I'll work hard, I promise." A smile tugged at Samuel's lips, and he leaned back in his seat. This was what mattered to him the most. Not the deals, not the jets, but the impact he could have on the people around him. He knew what it was like to struggle for recognition, to fight for opportunities, and he had made it his mission to ensure that others didn't have to fight alone. As he drove away from the airport, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the road, Samuel reflected on the bigger picture. He had been given a chance to build something meaningful, not just for himself, but for others too. The wealth, the business, the jet, they were tools. But the real legacy he would leave behind would be the lives he changed, the opportunities he created, and the people he helped along the way. Samuel wasn't just a farmer. He was a man who understood that true success wasn't measured by what you had, but by what you gave to others. And as he looked ahead, he knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more to do. And with that thought, he stepped on the gas, the road ahead stretching out before him, a journey of growth, of change, and of success. Not just for himself, but for the people he would continue to lift along the way. Samuel's journey was never about the destination, but about the people he met along the way, the lives he touched, and the legacy he built. From the dirt roads of his humble farm to the polished floors of a private jet hangar, Samuel's story serves as a powerful reminder that success is not defined by the wealth you accumulate, but by the opportunities you create for others and the impact you leave behind. His path wasn't always easy. There were countless obstacles, doubts, and moments when giving up seemed like the easiest choice. But Samuel's unwavering belief in the value of hard work, his vision, and his commitment to lifting others alongside him paved the way for his success. In the end, Samuel didn't just buy a jet, he bought the chance to change lives, including his own. The jet was a symbol of his perseverance. But the real testament to his journey was the young man, Derek, who now had a chance to prove himself, and the countless others whose lives would be touched by Samuel's kindness, wisdom, and generosity. Samuel's story was a reminder that no matter where you start, with grit, determination, and a willingness to help others, you can achieve greatness. It wasn't just about the tools he acquired or the empire he built. It was about the people who walked with him, learned from him, and ultimately became part of his greater journey. As he drove into the horizon, Samuel knew that his real success wasn't just in what he had built, but in how he had changed the lives of those around him. And that, in the end, would be his greatest legacy. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this entire story and for joining us on Samuel's incredible journey. Your support means the world, and we hope this tale of perseverance, hard work, and uplifting others has inspired you as much as it inspired us to share it. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts with us. And if you want to see more stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We appreciate you being part of our community, and we can't wait to bring you more engaging stories. Until next time, take care and keep striving for greatness, just like Samuel did. Thanks again for watching.